Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday to learn more about how you can best serve your veteran clients who are also eligible for Social Security. Before I get started, I'm going to turn on the live transcription. That way, y'all can see what I'm saying. At the bottom of the screen, you should start to see a black box that is, captioning everything that I'm saying. So if you have an issue, please message me in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll try to help you out if you're not seeing that. But welcome you all. I see everyone trickling in. We're going to have a great presentation here today. As always, this presentation is being recorded. All of the materials, the PowerPoint, and the recording will be sent out to all registrants later on today or tomorrow, but certainly, tomorrow's Saturday. So maybe by Monday, but you will get a copy of everything here. So don't worry if you missed something or if you need anything else. Also, if anyone has any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat or the Q&A. If time permits, I will read your questions out loud to our presenter. And if time permits, hopefully our presenter will answer them. So since I see we have about 10 folks here, but I know we certainly had more that registered, I'm going to get started with the introductions to buy some time so that we can then get into our subject matter. And before I get into that, I do want to say that this was approved for CLE credit. At the end of this presentation, I will verbally announce the CLE code, and I'll also put it in the chat. But if anybody wants to remind me at the end, I will not be offended, because there were 2 times that I forgot, and thank goodness somebody reminded me. So please feel free to just let me know, hey, Alexis, can we have the CLE code? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter, Marissa O'Connor. Marissa is a 17-year attorney licensed in Florida, California, the United States District Court of the Middle District of Florida, and the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. During Marissa's time in private practice, her areas of practice and expertise covered these following areas, including but not limited to elder abuse, medical malpractice litigation, probate and estate planning, and Social Security disability. In 2016, Marissa moved over to the nonprofit sector with Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida. First as a helpline attorney, then as a staff attorney in the Public Benefits Unit, and now as manager of Public Interest and Public Benefits. Throughout her career, Marissa has assisted clients with matters related to veterans benefits, Social Security benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, and the Supplemental Nutritional Program. Marissa has also worked closely with veterans enrolled in supportive services for veterans and families to provide holistic services to veterans and their families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Thank you so much, Marissa, for being here, for dedicating your time to our professional development, and for all that you do in our community. And without further ado, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. All right, so today we're going to talk about veterans' work in Social Security cases. And I think before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, it's important to understand exactly the differences between the veterans programs, VA programs, and Social Security programs. Both have programs for people who are disabled. Under the VA, there is a non-service connected pension and service-connected disability. Similar to SSDI and SSI, you've got the non-service connected pension is income-based, kind of like the SSI for Social Security. Service-connected disability, they don't consider the income, but they do look at whether the disability either started or was aggravated during the time of active duty service. There are other criteria for VA pension and disability, just like our SSDI. The standards are different for the VA disability compared to Social Security disability, whether it be for SSI or SSDI, and just to understand, and I should probably back up for a minute here, is that SSI is the Social Security's income-based, and SSDI is what we put into the system. So when we work, we put money into the system and into Social Security. And so if there is later a disability claim and that is approved, then it comes from that same money that we put in. But both SSI and SSDI require a showing of a disability. And for Social Security purposes, the disability requirement is that they must be so disabled that it would last or has lasted for 12 consecutive months, and they're unable to work during that time, or they're expected to result in death. For VA pension and disability, it is also, they are disabilities. And again, like one, it would be income-based, and one is not income-based. One is based on the work requirement. And they do have capped amounts for SSI and for VA pension for how much person can have in income and resources. They are in Social Security disability, you have the work, or the SGA, substantial gainful activity, at issue, that they can work, but they can't go over that amount. Otherwise, it's as if they are no longer disabled. With VA claims, they can work so long as they're not 100% total and permanent disabled. At that point, they are not permitted to work under VA rules. And that is really where we're going with this, because you'll see as I go through that the people who are the veterans who are at 100%, just because they are totally and permanently disabled does not mean they automatically get the Social Security benefits. And so that's what we're going to get into more as we go through. So here's a little more about it, the differences, the VA and the Social Security. I like it better looking at it this way, with the similarities and the differences, which I think I've covered most of this, that all four requiring some sort of impairment, disability, diagnosis. The VA pension and SSI are both income-based. Disability, VA disability, service-connected disability, that should be, and SSDI both relate to work. VA and SSA will give higher paying programs if applying for both. So they, depending on which ones, there may be an offset, or they may be able to get both benefits. A pension and SSI, they offset. So that's why a person who has a VA pension won't be able to get disability VA disability as well, because it just gets offset and you can only have one or the other. But you can offset a VA pension with SSI. And a veteran can receive both VA disability and SSDI at the same time, because they're not income-based programs. The differences, whether it was service connected or not for VA pension and VA disability, main difference between SSDI, SSI was whether there was enough work history, because there has to be so many credits to be able to get SSDI. Otherwise, they're going to look at SSI. And the Social Security standard for disability different than the VA's, and that you cannot get both the pension and the VA disability, as I just said. You can get SSDI and SSI so long as the SSDI amount is not above the SSI amount. So it gets offset. All right, so the Social Security veterans rules and cases. So what a lot of people don't realize is there are quite a bit of rules in the POMS, which is the procedural manual at the lower levels, and HALEX being at the hearing level, the administrative law judge level. And the rules that they have are primarily for military casualty, wounded warrior, and as I said earlier, the VA 100% permanent and total, which they call VAPT. And at the lower levels, both the wounded warrior and the total permanent and total cases, they are considered priorities. And this is through appeals as well. So it is at all levels, at the lower level. So if it needs to be the initial application and the reconsideration. And then if it moves on to a hearing, then per HALEX, these cases are considered critical cases. So if they fall under the wounded warrior or the permanent and total, then they should be expedited cases due to these priority and critical status. To be a military casualty wounded warrior, the person would have to be a current or former military member who sustained illness, injury, or a wound, and that they're alleging a physical or mental impairment to Social Security. And for Social Security purposes, it doesn't matter how or where it was caused, as long as they're alleging an impairment. And the impairment had to be incurred while on active duty, or it had to be after October 1st, 2001. And for active duty, that is anyone who is enlisted in a military branch. But if they are in reserves or National Guard, that is not necessarily going to be active duty. So if they were injured while they were in active duty training, and they had been deployed and then injured, that would be considered active duty. For permanent and total, the person has to be a veteran. They have to be 100% permanent and total disability rating. And this is only for the service-connected disability, not for a pension. It does not apply to that. And again, they have to be alleging a physical or mental impairment regardless of how it occurred. So what happens at the Social Security level is that Social Security has communications with the DoD and the VA on a weekly basis. DoD, Department of Defense, is informing Social Security of identities of people who fit into the military casualty wounded warrior classification, and the VA is notifying Social Security of the permanent and total classification identified people. And so what they do when a claim is being made is they look to see if it matches any of the identifications made from the DoD or the VA. And if so, then they are supposed to be flagging the claim immediately. And they are supposed to be they're supposed to make an appointment or either have the application completed at that time when the claimant contacts them, or they set up a time to do the application no later than 3 business days from that first contact. If they go through the 800 number, then the field office has to call the claimant within 2 business days to schedule that appointment, because they're supposed to be doing this so that it can keep that priority status and get expedited. So Social Security has set out that they should be considering closed periods of disability. So what we tend to see on a lot of cases is that the person, they'll deny somebody even if they have excuse me, even if there's been improvement, but they met it at one point during the alleged time period. So for veterans, they are supposed to be looking actually to see if there is a closed period of disability. And so and this may occur more with the wounded warriors. So if they are somebody who was injured on duty and they're getting their medical treatment on a military base, and they go ahead and apply for Social Security, not really knowing how it's going to be, but they know at that time it's going to take a long time to recover. And then by the time they get out, they may have improved and not meet any of the disability rules, but they still should be able to get the Social Security benefits for that time, for that closed period. And then Social Security has a potential onset date that they are supposed to be looking at. They're supposed to develop an earlier onset or a potential onset date that is either, it can be earlier or later than the alleged onset date, but in their POMs, they are instructed to try to develop an earlier onset date. They have to get receipt. The field office gets receipt from DDS 2 days after they submit the claim to DDS or the appeal. And if it's a paper file, it's 7 days. They get that receipt. The field office is to expedite payments. So if there's an approved claim, then the field office will expedite the payments. The field office also is supposed to send hearing and review of hearing requests. So an appeals council request, they're supposed to send those directly to the appropriate division so that they can make sure that it is still a priority case or a critical case at the higher levels. And then for the permanent and total veterans, they can submit the VA award letter as verification if there was no system alert to say that this person is 100% disabled, permanent and total. Because what's going to happen is the veteran's going to come in and say, but I'm 100% rated with the VA, so I should get Social Security benefits. Well, if they don't have them in the system and it hasn't been, they can't flag it that way. They can flag it as a priority case as long as there's a VA award letter that says that there was a rating of 100% for permanent and total disability. So here's a sample of an award letter that would suffice to make that verification. There are multiple pages on this, but they do have this in the POMs. And so you could refer to that if you wanted to see more of the sample. But you can see it does talk about where how much the monthly entitlement is, when it started, that it's service connected, and it'll give the percentage, and it'll talk about in here too if it's permanent and total. So this is what they're going to look for to make sure that a veteran can come under this priority. And these are samples of the flags that are supposed to go with the files. So you can see that it's supposed to be going to each unit with this flag at each level for both the 100% permanent and total, as well as the military casual wounded warrior. So in developing the record, and I'm going to go into this a little more in the next section on my on what you should look for when you're developing the record, but know that the POMS does set forth what Social Security should be doing to develop the record. So they have, they are supposed to be requesting records from the DoD, because the DoD has the records from the military treatment facilities. And those are generally held at those treatment facilities for at least 2 years from the time of treatment. After that, there's different places where they may be, but Social Security does make the records request to the DoD to see if there's any military treatment facility records. They are to develop the record from using the VA records, and they ask for a health summary or healthcare summary from the VA. So it's more like a transcript of records. And that's for any of the VA medical, either VA medical center or VA clinics, any of the Veterans Health Administration facilities. And then finally, they are to request records from the National Personnel Record Center, NPRC, to get service medical records. So once if they're no longer records at the military treatment facilities, then the NPRC should have them. It's usually, I find, either at the NPRC or at the VA. So they should get those records from one or the other. And then to adjudicate the claims, to make the decision. So we know, at least for veterans, they've got the award letter saying they're 100% permanent and rated, permanent and total rated. And so under the POMS, it says that Social Security should be considering VA and DoD decisions, because they are other government agencies, and they should be considering any of the evidence, or all of the evidence really, that the DoD or the VA used to make that decision. And they are not required to follow the decisions, but they are required to at least consider them. And this came up in Noble v. Commissioner of Social Security in 2020 at the 11th Circuit. And in that case, the matter was remanded to the ALJ because the ALJ did not consider the rating decision. It wasn't even addressed in the decision. So they say, like the POMS, the first question is, does the ALJ's decision show that it was considered? Because it must be. And if they didn't consider it, then it needs to be remanded. And the next question doesn't need to be answered, and that next question being, did they follow the decision? But really, they're not required to follow it, but just not even addressing it or acknowledging it is a reason for remand. So VA records, what to request, how to use them. So this is where there are more records. You'll see there are more records here than what Social Security is supposed to be required or supposed to be requesting to develop the record. So I'm going to preface this by my recommendation is get these records and submit them, because it's going to provide you with more than what Social Security is getting. So first, there's the personnel records. So I noted before that the NPRC has the service medical records, but there may also be information in the personnel file itself, and that also comes from the NPRC. Usually, the form that is used to request that is the VA form SF-180, and you can see I have highlighted here, you're looking for the official military personnel file. And the reason why I recommend that you get this file is because you never know what you're going to find in there. There may have been misconduct or discipline, I should say, discipline reports. There could be just there could have been work restrictions. There could have been anything that didn't require the veteran or the military personnel to have to go to a health facility. They may have just gone to a sick bay. It just might have been noted that, but nothing was really emphasized. There are no records from they didn't go to an outpatient clinic or an off base hospital or anything like that. So, but there might at least be a note in here that happened, even though they don't have those off-base records in the file. And those might help. And then there are things that could show mental health issues, if there was an unauthorized absence or AWOL, if there were, if the person was getting into fights, if there was substance use. I mean, all of those things might be able to help support a mental health impairment. And then I said the work restrictions, and also when a person is discharged from their military service, they are supposed to receive an exit exam for physical when they leave. And it's not always done, but it may be, if it was, there may be notation on there, and it's just enough to show when something started, even if it got worse through the years, but at least you can show that progression, that this is something the person has had for 10 years, and now they're at a point that they need the disability benefits from Social Security because it's gotten to a point now where they can't work. On that same form, the SF-180, you would also request the service medical records. And I talked about that before, that Social Security is supposed to be requesting those. They will, Social Security is going to request a health summary. Actually, I'm sorry, that's on the VA form, not this one, for the service records. The service records, you want to get all the records again. Indicate that if you know specific hospitals, you can see right under this highlighted section, it says, I request inpatient hospitalization records from, with a blank. So if you know that there were specific hospitalizations during the time of service, be sure to fill that in there. If this form too, this last page that I have up here as well, this page is going to show you where to send the SF-180. And it'll tell you, it's all based on when they served, which branch they served. If you may need to request the medical records, service medical records from a different place than the personnel records, but this last page on the form will provide that information to you. And then again, if there were injuries or conditions that started during the service and developed, then these service medical records will be helpful to you in your Social Security claim. And then the VA medical records, this is the one that I started talking about before accidentally. They have, Social Security is going to request a health summary. So if you look at this form, it has a health summary prior 2 years. While I do recommend setting a time frame for how many records you want, I still recommend that you request all records and not just the health summary, because you never know what information is not making it into the health summary. And I understand why Social Security would want that, just to limit the amount of records in their possession, and what they have to review, because depending on how long the veteran has been receiving medical treatment at the VA, you can have some pretty long records, in the thousands, to review. So that's why they're trying to limit it as much as possible. I'm always concerned about what's not making it in there that can be of help. You want to check with the regional medical center, the VA medical center, to find out if they need an electronic signature, if it's okay to have an electronic signature, or if they need a wet signature. It just depends on the regional center. If a veteran was treated at a clinic, you still request the records through the regional medical center, because that's where the medical records requests go through. So depending on which county, they're each going to have different regional offices. Okay. And then the claims file. And this is one that really can be valuable. It provides information about any compensation and pension claim filed, so service-connected disability or even the non-service connected pension. But it's going to have medical records in there. It might have pertinent personnel records in there that go towards what their claim was. In the VA process for benefits, when a veteran claims a disability, a service-connected disability, they have to go on a C&P, a compensation and pension exam, which is similar to a consultative exam for Social Security purposes. And at those exams, the provider, the healthcare provider who's conducting it, they will complete a disability benefit questionnaire, also called a DBQ. And that it goes into a lot more detail than what you see for medical statements for Social Security and for the CE reports. And it does ask the question on there, does this condition cause problems for working? So it's something you really want to look at if they're claiming the same disability for Social Security as they are from the VA. This is your underlying information that the case was talking about, that the POMS was talking about earlier. It's not just what's in the rating decision, but how did they get to that decision? So you want to look at at these, you want to be able to see these ZBQs and see what the doctor said about the impairments and the disability. And then finally, VA vocational rehabilitation records. The VA has a voc rehab unit. And I believe right now they keep changing the name. I believe it's VR&E right now is the name of it. And through the voc rehab with the VA, though, there's a couple things that can happen. A veteran may claim unemployability, which you might see in the C file, in the claims file. About that claim, but that's saying that they have a high enough rating that they can apply for unemployability, saying I'm unable to work because of these conditions. And if they're granted unemployability or TDIU, then that will give them a combined rating of 100% and put them in total and permanent disability. But what voc rehab also does at the VA is they provide services. So they do assessments and they see if there's anything they can help the veteran with, whether it be education or trainings or even equipment. I know veterans who have gone through it and through assessments with the VA voc rehab, and they have said that the person can't work, but they needed things to help them at home to be able to live independently, like computers or something like that. But they do that assessment and they can say whether they feel a veteran can work or cannot work. And so that's why if you don't see any claims for voc rehab in the C file or for the unemployability, you may want to go to the vocational rehab itself and ask for the records. Usually if the veteran's getting services through them and there's been an assessment done, there's usually a case manager in that unit that the veteran's working with, and sometimes they'll accept a records request and put it through the process so they can help you to get the records. And there's a copy here the top part here about what that records request is going to look like. But it's just a release for information. And with all of these, the VA is supposed to, not NPRC, but the VA, for any of the VA records, they are supposed to provide these records within 30 days. And if it takes longer than 30 days, they're supposed to let you know. And they may ask for a new one to be submitted at that point. It's as just a good rule of thumb, tickle a follow-up for 30 days out from when you send it, so that you can see if you haven't gotten it by then, see if you can get some kind of status or get them pushed through. But you do want to allow at least 30 days to get the records. So if you're coming up on a deadline and it's going to be, you need it before 30 days, you can try, but they'll say they have 30 days to get it to you. And then sometimes it helps for the veterans to get the records on their own. So here's a list. They can go to you can go to va.gov/records, and you can see all the different things that the veterans can get on their own. They can get a copy of their DD-214, which is their release document that says what kind of discharge character they had, and there are codes on there as to if there were any medical issues or if they can re-enlist, if there were there's just a bunch of different codes on there that can be helpful too. But then they can get their VA medical records through here, their benefits letter. So if you need that verification letter right away to have when you're filing a claim and you want to have it, I would recommend you have the veteran go to this. This is probably taking them to e-benefits so that they can get a copy of that letter. And I've kind of gone a bit faster on that than I planned. I do have some other tips for you and things, and I was going to do questions after, but I see there's some in the chat. Maybe I'll take a break now.
Yeah, sure. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Marissa. You know, I've dabbled a little bit in veterans work, and you know, I had a colleague that once said to me, the VA can sometimes be clear as mud, right? And I had just never heard that before. And when I dabbled in Social Security and I dabbled in veterans work, it made sense. So thank you so much for all of that practical advice that I know practitioners will be able to rely on. So a couple of questions did come through the chat, and you know, anyone who's on, please feel free to ask any questions. Don't be shy. It's so rare to have someone that you can just directly ask questions to about this stuff, because God knows if you call the VA, you'll be waiting for a while. But so the first question we have is the NPRC has not been sending full military personnel files or in-service records since COVID. All I have received from them are the DD-214 forms only. Are there other sources or options, excuse me, or suggestions for getting the entire military personnel and in-service treatment records?
No. It's a short answer. What I have been doing, because I have been finding this as well, is we have actually been resubmitting our requests, and it's interesting to see, you know, I think it's whoever is on the other end processing. And now that we're, you know, I think we're finally coming out of COVID, so hopefully this won't remain a problem, but that definitely has been happening the past 2 years, and that's even if you're lucky to get a response. I mean, we have had some that we have requested that have taken, you know, 4 months later, we're like, wait, we still don't have these records, and so we've just been resubmitting our requests and seeing what we can get that way.
Yeah.
But they're the only agency that holds the records.
Wow. Well, hopefully they start to turn that around, you know, because it really does affect folks. What do they do when they're waiting, right? What do they do in the time? That's the reality. And actually, so the other question was actually in response to the first question that we asked. And so I do see as well a comment that the NPRC closed in March of 2020 and we're only fulfilling emergency requests. And I do recall that because I was still doing some veterans work at that time. I think the Social Security Administration has started their in-person stuff at the office again, right?
Yes, they have. They have. And I don't think it's in all offices, but yes.
Yeah.
And some are by appointment only.
Sure. So those are the two, that's the question that came in so far. Maybe a few more will come in while you're going over, you know, other advocacy tips or considerations. I didn't mean to cut you off. If there was anything else that you wanted to say on that topic or in response.
No, that's all I have for that.
Awesome.
All right. Then I will go through these and then we'll see if there are any other questions. So going back to the beginning and the rules, the POMs and the HALEX about expediting these the wounded warriors and the total and permanent cases, just keep in mind these are only applying to initial applications and appeals. So if somebody has a continuing disability review, they do not get a priority. It will not be expedited, even if they are falling under a wounded warrior or total and permanent criteria. And these records that I just went through in my section, forget about for a minute what POMs say and what Social Security is doing to develop the record. My rule of thumb is this applies to any veteran or military personnel who is seeking Social Security disability, because they may not be getting the priority, but you're going to find information in these documents that Social Security probably is not going to see unless you point it out to them. And they probably aren't going to request them the same way as they would if it were somebody who's meeting criteria and expedited. I don't know that they would develop the case the same way. So it's up to us to be able to do that. There are special veterans benefits under Social Security. They are different than what we've been talking about, but I did want to just point out that this only applies for World War II veterans. If they are eligible for SSI, then they should be eligible for these special veterans benefits as well. And it's for any time that they were qualified and reside outside of the US. Some income things to think about too when you're working with your clients, your veteran clients or military clients. Military disability benefits do not offset SSDI if the military service is after December 31st, 1956, which more than likely most of our clients are probably after that time. Maybe not, but they will not offset the SSDI. The VA income is considered unearned income for purposes of SSI. The SGA for the military casualty and wounded warriors is going to be calculated differently because they're in the military still, presuming that they were still in the military, I should say, because they may be in a medical treatment and not actually working, but they're still getting paid. So their SGA is different. So what SSA is supposed to be doing to calculate the SGA is to look at the reasonable worth of the claimant's actual work activity by comparing it to work activities from people in the civilian force. So what work did they actually do, and how much of it, and what kind of rate would that person get if they were in a non-military workforce. So yeah, they receive full pay while they're receiving medical treatment, and so they want to make that distinguishing factor. And just a reminder, I know I went into the VA benefits part of it. You may already be VA accredited, but if you are not and you want to work in that and give the advice on VA benefits, then you do need to be accredited. So because it could be construed as preparation, presentation, and prosecution for a claim for VA benefits. So just, you may want to go ahead and get VA accredited if your clientele is military or veterans, just to have that. I can direct anyone to where to go if they want to get accredited. It's not a difficult process, but you should look into that. And now I'm back at questions.
I'm muted, sorry. I said, awesome, thank you so much. I was thinking, I remember when I was doing Social Security work and veterans work and the POMs and then the Social Security individual rules and trying to find out what's been updated versus what's not. Is there something that, like how often are the POMs updated? And is there anything that, practitioners can get notifications, kind of like when you're following like a case in session or something like that, of any updated POMs or updated SSA regulations?
I'm sure there is, but I keep them bookmarked on my browser. And you can have there's a page for the POMs where you can get to the table of contents, you can get to the changes, you can get to any emergency orders, and you can keep track of it that way. Because I always figure going to the web page when I need it, then I'm going to get the most current information.
That's a great point. Do you think that that's something that maybe you could email over to me so I can include that with the materials? That way folks can say, all right, this is right where I go. Because I know if you type in things, that takes you everywhere and there's a lot of distraction online.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. It'll be 2 sites, one for POMs, one for HALEX.
That is perfect. I know I would have really appreciated that if I was still doing that work. So, without that, I don't have any other questions. I don't know if any folks, who are still here have any questions. If any questions come up at a later date, please feel free to email me directly. And I'll do what I can to try. Oh, and then Marissa is giving you her contact information. Look at that. So you don't have to email me, email Marissa. But yeah. So, but with that, Marissa is going to be giving you a copy of this PowerPoint, which I think is huge because it just has so much practical information, even going down to just the names of forms and who you contact, which sometimes can be a real pain to find out on your own. With that being said, I know you've been talking already for this hour. But if there is anything else that you would like to say in closing as we're starting to receive the thank yous. So I leave it to you if there's anything you want to round out before we turn off the recording.
No, I just want to thank everyone who did sign up and who was able to come, and I hope this was helpful to you. I think there's a lot of information within Social Security and within the VA files that need to be taken more advantage of to be able to help our clients. So I hope this helped to highlight those.
Absolutely. I certainly think it did. And I remembered the CLE code. So I popped that into the chat, but to read it out loud, it is 220-264-9, N as in Nancy. If anyone has any trouble with it, please just reach out to me directly. I'm going to be including it in the email with all the materials. So, you'll have another chance to see it if you missed it now. But thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do for our veteran community, for, folks, with disabilities, for our homeless community. I don't know if you want to put a plug out for the reentry while we're here.
The Central Florida Reentry Network. There's a veterans subcommittee. Both the general committee and the veterans subcommittee are great resources. So if anybody is helping veterans and specifically reentering veterans and would like to join our subcommittee, then please get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to put you on our meeting.
I'm going to bother you for a link to that too, probably.
Okay.
All right. So with that, everybody, happy Friday. I can't believe it's finally Friday. Yeah. I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. And thank you so much, Marissa, for everything you do and for sharing this time with us.
Thank you.